Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm great. I see you've got sunshine in Connecticut.
Sunshine, something we haven't seen in a long time, but no blizzard today. In fact, it's over 60 degrees, and all of the 20 inches of snow on my lawn have melted all at once in the sunshine. So I have a lake on my front lawn instead of snow.
Well, that is welcome uh, as spring begins to air itself slightly. Um, we are talking about agents,
Yes.
AI agents, and two interesting points. One is that I had somebody admonishing me the other day for us spending so much time on AI and explaining the various pieces of AI and how they work and how CEOs can run that. Should be thinking about, not should be, but we think it's advisable to be learning this stuff in detail so that you can really understand its effect on their ability to do their job in the future, because we think it's going to materially, well, we know it is. It's materially changing the substance of work. And so it turns out that that friend of mine's son told her that she needed to watch these because she would be at risk at her job if she didn't become conversant, at least in the technology. She doesn't necessarily have to use it yet, but she has to at least be conversant in what's going on. And she, to her credit, she did, and she raised a whole issue about um, AI safety within their corporation as a result. I hope she's not making so much noise that she gets fired because of that. That would be
Right.
unfortunate. And then we have to shout out to my sister, because my sister religiously watches what you and I do, Deirdre, and she critiques me. She doesn't critique you because she likes you. She's a big fan. Like almost everybody that we ever hear about, they really like you. I think they tolerate me, or at least I know my sister for many years just tolerated me. I think she does better than that these days, but she's watching. And she has no good reason, but enjoys this, I think. I mean, she comments about everyone that we do. So I'm glad to see that we're having a lot of people watching these things from different professions, different backgrounds. And in the both cases, there's no reason why they would have to be doing this, honestly, at this point, but they are. And I'm very happy about that. We get comments. I got a comment the other day from somebody in Michigan that's watching what we're doing and is very interested in what we're doing. And they're in a related industry. But agents is an important part of this. And there's been a lot of talk about agents, Deirdre, and a lot of talk about how they fit into the whole subject of AI. And so, with that, why don't I let you take and introduce the topic a little further?
Certainly. We've been talking about AI agents in various ways for what, the past 2 or 3 months, Tom. And we promised that this video was going to be one where we actually showed you how the agents worked. We were going to pick up from our video 72-2C, in which we asked Claude and Grok to discuss the strategy of our Peak Coffee Company example. And as part of the work that we had the models do, we asked them to tell us what of the work they thought could be handled by agents, what was complex enough to be require the AI to deliver decision support material to the human, and then what could be handled as a hybrid. And we were going to go into that because we had lots of very interesting comments to say. But that was 2 weeks ago. And in the past 2 weeks, so much has happened in relation to agents, and agents as part of what we call the AI insight layer, which oversees across all parts of a company, across all assets of a company, following the data flows of a company. Agents as part of that AI layer, how they are working today. And you're going to pick this up, Tom, and show our listeners and viewers how agents are being used in a couple of fairly complex bits of research that you've been doing over the past couple of days. So, with that, over to you, Tom.
Yes, we're going to show you how these agents are functioning so that you can see what you and I think of as responsible use of agentic AI. Because it's enterprise driven. We think these applications at this point, being enterprise driven, are better than not. Meaning we think small use cases buried somewhere in the organization isn't going to solve your problems. We don't think. Maybe in some cases it is, but not in general. Secondly, we want you to see them functioning. So we did a video last week on Moltbook, Moltbook, which is an unconstrained environment. Think of it as an AI agent playground. And it allows the agents unconstrained to do pretty much whatever they want to. And you can extrapolate good and bad from that, as in everything. We don't think that's really helpful. I mean, it may be helpful to learn what you don't want them to do rather than what you want them to do. But we're going to go through a number of cases of productive use of this. And we're going to start with Grok. So let me pull up Grok here for us, Deirdre. So you asked this question just a few minutes ago when we were just making sure we had everything set up right.
Correct.
Would you please describe Project Maven as used by the Department of War? And when we do this, you'll see some things. And so why don't you describe a little bit about what we're going to see as this happens? You'll have to watch quickly because it'll go by fast, but
Right. What's going to happen is Grok operates as a layer in itself and sort of almost subcontracts work out to various agents, as many agents as it needs. But then the final answer to us involves the Grok layer combining the information from all of the agents into one coherent answer, seamless. And we wouldn't know unless we go into the process of thinking, and Tom will go into that process of thinking, that agents were even used in coming up with the answer. So with that, Tom, let's see what Grok does.
now the real risk that we run here is we did ask this question and we got an answer. So the risk is it could reuse the research. So we should change this question a little bit, Deirdre, maybe add a complexity to it so it has to do new research. What
Um,
complexity would you add to this?
why don't we talk about describe Project Maven and the work of other technologies as used by the Department of War?
How about this? And the use of related.
Yes. Clearly, we're going after something that's in the news right now.
So, um, would you please describe Project Maven and the use of key related technologies used by the Department of War? Okay,
All
that
right.
should add enough complexity so we won't get back the research we just had it do. Um, all right, you ready?
I'm
Now,
ready.
what you're going to see here, and we'll point this out quickly, is right down here, or it could be even up here. I'm not sure how this is going to display. You'll see where you'll see it says something about agents, and it will start coming up with these little globes that'll be different colors, and it'll say Agent 1, Agent 2, Agent 3. Depending on how fast this goes, you can see it's functioning by the agents. Later on, we'll click on that layer and see what the agents were doing, or at least most of what the agents were doing. So with that, just keep your eyes focused here. And you can see the agents thinking. There's the first agent, the green one. And there's another one, a blue one. There's a red one, a blue one. I guess that was yellow. So it's using four different agents to do the work, and you can see it's pulling key elements. What you're seeing here is really what the agent was feeding back to the Grok layer. That was the in the words.
Right.
Um,
And
so you,
17 seconds it took, you can see.
yes, it did. And you can see here it goes through, it says Project Maven, goes through the key purposes, key functions, the core, big data overload. Yep. Okay, human in the loop design. Yep, absolutely. Real world use. Okay, computer vision, multi-sensor. This is really the key right here. This is interesting, but the real key is this one. Multi-sensor data fusion and integration. This is what we can and should. We've done this. We've done a demonstration of this, Deirdre, in where we show a video called Claude gives Grok a B, right? They give
Correct.
Grok a grade of B. It's 72 2C. And this is where we're having it create take data from various sensors and integrate it and do this what they're calling here data fusion and integration. Then there is development in the pipeline with machine learning, targeted decision making support. This is really a big deal. But notice here it's decision support, meaning there is it's leading to a human intervention to have to make a decision of some form.
Okay.
Evolution in current status. Now, I'm not seeing a lot of technology descriptions here, Deirdre. Are you?
I'm not, and we'll drill down to that. But first, let's go over to the thoughts column, Tom,
Okay.
to show the viewers.
I was talking
Um,
about Google Palantir, so I guess it's down here. And those are ones I know. So here, it thought for 17 seconds. We'll open this up, and it will show us on the side. It calls Grok the leader, meaning it's that layer. And it's telling you what Grok was doing. And what you're seeing here is the key of the information that it's synthesized to. And then it's taking agents two's key work, and this is what it must be using as agent two,
right.
the bulk of it coming from agent two. And then Grok did the following and then synthesized all that into here, regardless of the fact you had agent one, two, three, and four functioning here. So they gathered data, but when it came to the end, that it was the bulk of the key element came from agent two. So it must mean they were getting similar sets of data. But this is what we call the productive use of agents, and you see it's describing what those four agents did, and it sees this green one, the green blob or the yellow green one, as Grok is the layer that is managing that. Any comments or thoughts about this, Deirdre?
I only point out that we have seen thoughts columns like this, which lists all four agents.
Yes.
And we know that the Grok layer is picking up and synthesizing all of the information to come up with what's actually a fairly compact answer to what we wanted to do. Why don't we drill down further, Tom? Why don't
What
you
else
come
would you
up
like
with
to
the
ask?
question this time?
All right. Pardon?
You come up with the question here.
All right. Can you please describe Anthropic's involvement in the controversy?
Sounds good.
Please describe Anthropic involvement in Project Maven and the controversy. Let me add another complexity. Are there any key resources that would help us understand this better?
Sounds good.
Okay. And notice I'm on expert because I want to use as much power as I can here to show you how to do this. So, Deirdre, you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
Agents thinking one,
All right.
all
We had to
four
quickly go to
agents are
four.
involved.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can see by the sources that they're coming up with a political answer here. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, for those of you that are listening to this, you just saw Agent 2 pop up with something critical.
And Agent 3 before that.
Yes.
Okay.
So became involved recently, relatively recently, late 2024 after a long program launch, beginning launch. Integrated timeline, major contract, practical battlefield, partnership structure, controversy, the feud.
And
Uh,
now it's interesting that it's calling it a feud here.
yes, it is. It's an
That's an
interesting.
editorial comment, yes.
Yes, no kidding. It talked about constitutional AI. The thing is that Anthropic, if you don't know this, and I know Deirdre does, that Anthropic has their own constitution of how they function, and that is what is in conflict with
And here
the.
are the resources.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the conflict with what the uses are and how.
Correct.
And basically, Palantir is really managing this process, and it's Palantir's execution of the process.
Now, what's interesting is the different type of key resources here. We've got Anthropic's official statement, we have Wikipedia, we have the Washington Post and Bloomberg, and a LinkedIn post and a Substack, and then a reference to a book discussing overall the project Maven. So this is actually a very wide range of sources. If we wanted to do, and clearly giving us a book title and so forth, it might expect us to do some in-depth research to help get what we want out of this answer. Let's look
Now,
at the thoughts. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
well,
Tom.
you and I both know that there was a recent interview that both of us watched of the
Right,
CTO at at the Department of War at the All In podcast, a relatively
right.
recent version that we highly recommend because he does an outstanding job. He's a tech founder CEO from Silicon Valley, and he's now CTO of the Department of War. And he gave a very clear description of the issue and why it's an issue.
And it might be interesting to know how Grok came up with those resources as opposed to a broader range. But anyway, let's look at the thoughts. Let's see what happens here. Okay, we see at the top all four agents provided answers. There's agent two again, very chatty. Agent three is provided additional information. Agent back to agent two with more information. Um, Grok leader agent two is very chatty here, very
Yes, Agent Two
interesting.
like Grok liked Agent Two's work and a little bit of Agent Three, but kind of dismissed one and four,
Right.
or used only small parts of them, one and four. Interesting, very
Yes.
interesting. All right. So I think we've described a little bit of the what you and I would call, Deirdre, the productive use of agents in an environment like this. And one of the hallmarks of this is that the agents are functioning with a management layer. And this is key because what we've seen and the things we've seen that are uses that we don't believe give you as much enterprise leverage are the ones that are not functioning within an enterprise layer. And so we think that they're best thought of inside a management layer and what you and I call the insight layer of an organization. What Grok is doing here is functioning somewhat like your personal insight layer.
Mhm.
And we actually have done podcasts on this where we go through and show you, and specifically in that, where Claude gives Grok a B, where we ran that insight layer using Grok, and we ran it using Claude, and then we did a compare and contrast of the results of that. And fundamentally, what we saw was the results were comparable in the end, but the way you got there was very different. And it one way would resonate with one style of leadership and one style of team, and the other would resonate with another.
I think another point to mention here, Tom, and I'm foreshadowing some comments that you're going to get into in depth in a few minutes, is that this is the first layer of output from Grok on the subject. Even though we've drilled down a little bit, if we really wanted to understand what was going on here, we would have to do some more rounds of prompts and looking at the response and more prompts and so forth, because we keep getting different information with each layer of prompts, with each time we prompt, so that you don't really find out what's really happening until you're really satisfied that you've asked a series of questions and have really gotten down there. Now, we're asking right now about a news story. If you were working on a project for your business, for example, a market analysis, or you wanted to get in there and do work with technologies here or understand the technologies more or something, you'd have to keep remembering that this is really only the reference step of our five-step process, which you'll go into more again later, Tom, where this is not everything you need to know. This is just your starting point here. So, with that, Tom, I'm sorry, proceed.
Oh, no, 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 no. The so I would say I know both sides of this argument pretty well. And I would say if you really want this, you're wasting your time here. Go straight to the All In podcast interview because it will get to the nub of the issue just like that. And you'll walk away after, first of all, he's a fascinating fellow. You can see why he has that job. He's very clean, very crisp thinker, brilliant. And the interviewers are asking good questions. These are helpful and certainly would give you context, but you could push further where you ask for, well, what about specific players that are actively involved in the negotiations? Have they given any statements or interviews, right? And you find out pretty quickly. But that's just something we'll come back. So, Deirdre, would you like to now move from this description of where Grok is functioning as that layer, managing these agents to do something for us?
Yes, Tom, let's move on to another example. And I think you're talking about moving to Claude now, which will give our viewers and listeners another example and another way of using agents to do this sort of research for us. So please take us there.
Yes. So, Anthropic, it's just shocking that they would do this, but they have created their own personal layer to function as a personal layer. So, where Grok generically is functioning that way, they have created a function within the desktop version of Claude called Cowork. Now, there are others. Microsoft has one and so forth, but the one that is the really interesting one to us is the Cowork product. Now, just so you know, most people run their models, most people that I know run their models in browsers. I still do. I still use most of the time I'm using Claude in a browser. But if you download Claude's desktop app, it has two more functions in it. It has what's called a Cowork function, which is this tab there. And then it has something called a code function. And this is where it's providing you with the ability to quickly do coding. And it has a series of agents that are helping you execute that. And you can see you can define it locally and all kinds of different things. If you're programming, we're not doing programming here, but we could let it function as standard Claude, where it's just asking me to get back at it and go in here and do stuff. Or it could function as Cowork, which is it's just redefining itself as that management layer. And the reason it does is because it will customize what you do with plugins. And this will plug in and it will plug into it plugs into things like Excel, PowerPoint, or into Notion, for example. So why don't you take that for a second, Deirdre, and just talk about that concept of how Claude is functioning as the layer, and then you're doing the work, and then you're managing that work and doing it in within the layer, and the agent is the connection to that layer, executing something in that layer.
Correct. Now, I coined a word that's absolutely incorrect technologically, but here it comes. I started to call layers like this, or I was talking about Notion at the time, as a meta agent because it works to coordinate the work of agents and the work of something like chat in a way to solve a problem for you, to accomplish a task, to knock something off your list. And so, what this Cowork does, any sort of layer like this, is it pulls together your various tools that can be connected by APIs and allows you to work in multiple ways and synthesize the work you do to bring everything together to get one answer. Is that a fair statement, Tom,
Yes,
what this does?
yes, and we did do some a little bit of work earlier this morning just to look at the list of Cowork plugins that are available and the partners. And it came back, and you see it talked about partner built, where Salesforce did this, Slack, so forth. Then you've got the marketplace partners, GitHub, Lovable, Rogo, Snowflake. Then it had financial services plugins, which are Moody's, MTY, Altera, PitchBook. Then it had notable partnerships beyond that, that are CFO related, mostly for the CFO office. But there were a bunch of others, and we asked if it would connect to Notion because we know it does do that, and it had listed it, and it said good news, it does do a connector to Notion. So when you're talking about knocking stuff off your list or managing your work or whatever, you can actually use that, and the API is really an agent, and it's functioning, doing work there. One of the beauties is this function continues, that there's a little bit of spillover into Claude, because I was using, as you know, Deirdre, I was using Claude for something earlier today for a piece of work we're doing. It was actually the final work on the book that I'm writing. It publishes, I think, later this week. I think, if not next week, called ahead of the model, but um, ahead of the machine. And you'd think if I just finished writing this book and spent as much time on this, I'd remember the title, Deirdre. That's how brain dead I am. Ahead of the machine. But what what this did was, for the first time within Claude, it actually gave me a completely formatted, to the 6 by 9 format of my book, a one sheet appendix, in Microsoft Word. It has never been able to do that. I always had to do, it tries to, but it couldn't do it. I had to do cut and paste of raw text and put it in, format it, and it did a superb job.
Mhm.
Um, and so this is the first time I've seen that, and I'm not using Cowork to do that. I was just using raw Claude. But that tells you that this functionality is migrating in and around this. But the most efficient use of that would have been to have me do this work in Cowork and then have the agent execute it in my copy of the book, which I could have easily done, because I could have brought it up in that connected to Word and have it do that. Now, we don't. It doesn't automatically connect to Word today. It does PowerPoint and um, what was the other? Oh, Excel. It does Excel and PowerPoint. And I happen to know that my son had it described a piece of work, and asked Cowork to do it for him in Excel, and it gave him a beautiful result back. And as you know, Deirdre, and I know, and many on this podcast know, that he knows his way around Excel modeling pretty well. And I
Yes.
would say I kind of like what they did. Very interesting layer. Something we encourage you to at least look at if you're interested in doing this kind of work. This is more of a personal productivity tool, but what it's doing is it's functioning as that management layer that is helping you get work done, extending it into the kind of capabilities you're using on a regular basis. And before soon, it'll go into all the suite for Microsoft. So it'll be your calendar and so forth. And for all I know, it may have already done that. When it was telling us this and we started to look at it, it was saying it is actually adding new extensions on or plugins on a regular basis, which in my term is it's a plugin, but it's also an agent because it's functioning to do work for you through the use of Claude's capabilities. Deirdre, any thoughts on this before we move to a
Uh,
really
just reemphas
interesting?
just re-emphasizing that this is a video on agents, and this whole layer is full of agents. This is
Yes,
what makes this layer work.
absolutely. And this is all these different agents in here. So you're looking at, by the time they're done, there'll be hundreds of them. So that is another approach and another interesting capability of the LLM. And we think that's where it becomes powerful when you're using it both as you're using it as a layer to manage an enterprise or even your personal work, but at the same time, you're using the very powerful agentic architecture to execute very specific things. And you can see both of them are designed that way. They're just executing in a slightly different way. But I think if we got underneath a little further Claude's architecture, it's probably using agents to actually do the research also. Um, so with that, you want to talk about Cortical Labs.
Tom, you want to give this example, so why don't you go right ahead?
So then I'm going to do this for a very good reason. Um, we talk about using these things to help you understand things and topics you're dealing with. And being a tech junkie, these kind of things always appeal to me. And also, you and I are science junkies, so we get caught up in these scientific things. But there was a tweet that was issued or an ex post that was issued. I think it was March 7th that caught the attention of a friend of mine who sent it to me and said, "Is there what's going on here?" And I said, "I don't know," but they knew because of what it was, who was involved, that I should probably know something about this, or if I didn't, I should. So I did some research on it, and I think it's instructive. You saw the research, Deirdre. I was trying to, this is how protective Deirdre is of the content that we do here. I was trying to spring it on her because I prefer to do this raw and have her have to react to what we're doing and us react. But I had to convince her it was worthy. And you did qualify it as worthy.
It's worthy for this very important reason, and this is what I was talking about when I mentioned we get back to the human part. I keep mentioning these human machine partnerships, Tom. I haven't used that term in this video yet, so here it comes. And what we're going to see in this research is how easy it was for someone to run with the first bit of reference material without working through the other steps in the process to come up with a final product, and therefore misunderstood and misled others, or had the effect of misleading others. Well, what we're going to see is how Tom worked through our process to get from the initial uncertainty down to information that he felt he could trust. Now, when I mention our 5-step process, this is a process that we've discussed in previous videos. It starts with when you start to work with a model, you start by doing some research. Here it is. Start by doing some research so you get to understand the model, calibrate its characteristics, and understand, and I'm reading what Tom has written here, where it's sharp, where its confidence outruns its accuracy. So you're letting the model itself do some work. And then the example that Tom is about to give you it looks as if the person making the post stopped there. Well, what we say is you've got to take that initial output and work with it, interact with it, build the dialogue, as you'll see Tom does in this example. Question the assumptions. That's probably the biggest thing. You are coming to these models with your knowledge and judgment and instincts and your experience, and you bring that to what the model just spit out. Then you provide more context, you create the synthesis, and then you, as the human, the machine has done its work, and you, as the human, come up with the final product. So that's the process. And with that review of the process, Tom, why don't you take our viewers and listeners through it?
Yes, and that's a page from the upcoming book.
That's an example of the layout that Tom was talking about that Claude just did for him.
So here is this point, and I'll start here because, and as my son said, he said, "Well, when I see a post like this, I don't even look at it because it looks too much like it's hyperbolic." But my words, not his, but that was essentially it. And it said, "Let me explain what just happened because I don't think people realize how insane this is." Now, it says Cortical Labs put 200,000 real human brain cells onto a silicon chip and trained them to play Doom in 1 week. Now, um, many people would have a one phrase reaction to that if you understand this stuff, but it goes through and I asked this. This is a function, those of you that use X, you know this function exists where in a post you can click on the Grok symbol and then Grok will try to explain this to you in a little more detail. And it talks here about lab-grown human neurons with silicon chips. So it integrates lab-grown human neurons with silicon chips to enable biological computing, demonstrating by training the system to play Doom in 1 week using minimal power output, far below AI clusters' megawatt demands, so meaning 800 to 1,000 watts for 30 units, below what would be megawatts for silicon chip neuron-like function. It's backed by In-Q-Tel, and those that are in the know realize that In-Q-Tel is the CIA's investment arm in Silicon Valley. Uh, Shipments in 25. I'm not even going to say these words because they mean something very different in the intelligence world, and I can't imagine they would use these here. But it's called the Cortical Cloud, allowing remote deployment of neurons delivered through this cloud. And it goes in to describe this stuff. And it says the video underscores the public unease with this. It's dystopian. I'm not even going to use these terms. Okay. Now, that's what it came back and said. And I said, is this real evidence? And then, now, the reason why I'm not repeating this for you and letting it happen in time is because it will give me a different answer. And it's probably going to be a more evolved answer because I've already asked it once. And so remember, it learns what you ask. And so I wanted you to see what it said. Notice that this first reaction here is yes, this is real. And it then goes in and very carefully describes in a lot of detail why it's real. And it goes back through here and says, okay, it's not hype. There's just a little bit of nuance around. It's a hybrid system. Software handles the game engine, and okay, but basically, this is legitimate biotech. The company's been transparent, and the tech is now commercially available. There are ethical debates. Again, I'm not going to even say these terms because they're inflammatory. All right. Now, and notice how it didn't take a lot of thought here to do this. It did use a couple of agents here, and you can see it used some of Agent Three's work. So it says it used a couple of different agents to get here. So, and this is a good example where it used information from all three agents to arrive at the answer. So there was a fair amount of interaction here where it did a lot of research for me so I could be confident. This is where, though, Deirdre, in the way that you and I talk about this, if you are not bringing your own cognition to this thing, right, your own thought process, you could be convinced by the confidence of the machine because there's a lot of information here. It's done a lot of research. It keeps telling you, yes, this is real. We saw this in Moltbook, right, where it kept saying, no, it can't get out of control. It's not possible. Here are the reasons why it can't until we asked one question. And then it came back and said, oh, well, in that case, right, then it gave us like,
Correct.
whoa, an answer we kind of didn't expect it would be that extreme. But all right. So then I say, but well, then I think I missed here. Is this real evidence? Yes, it's real. Then the next question, what independent scientific verification has been done? So then it comes through, it says, yeah, it's been done, but primarily it's in the foundational technology and the core technology, neurons learning via feedback, and you just say, really? Neurons are learning? That's not how the humans learn. They use because of the cluster. Anyway, and it starts talking about all this stuff, and you go, again, you can be very convinced by all of this, and we can get into again. It went out and it looked at 191 web pages, and it did a lot of work here, um, to try to tell us what's going on. And I see it's interesting that it didn't seem to, even though it did a lot of work, it didn't attribute anything to any one particular agent.
And the work and the sources it went to, if you looked at them, they were social media sources more actually than YouTube. And
Yes.
if you scroll down more, and from the company itself, from Cortical Labs itself, but if you scroll down, you'll see Reddit and Instagram and more Reddit, and there
Medium.
was some
Yeah.
Facebook in there and so forth. So that 91 web pages may not be independently scientifically verified.
Yes, exactly. So that's the answer to scientific verification. But even though it came back and kept saying this, I still didn't believe it. So then I said, is there proven science that a single non-human hosted biological brain cell functions cognitively? The use of that cognition is of little interest to me. You can already beat by any biological cognition for the most part, right? Meaning you, Grok, have the ability to beat me playing chess right this moment if you wanted to. I'm not interested in whether it can beat me playing Doom. What I'm interested in is, is there proven science that a single, not, and what you'll pick up in here, even though it said it was a brain cell, it actually isn't. It's a synthesized neuron being used. So the design is human, but it's not a real human brain cell. Uh, and is that being used? And does that function cognitively? Well, notice here, no. There is no proven science that a single isolated biological brain cell neuron performs higher level cognition other than a synapse function, right? Yes, there is rigor peer review evidence. So now notice how then we start getting, okay. So then what you realize is, then you have to say, and notice it had to do a lot of work, 277 places it had to go to start getting some of this information. And then it's into laboratories and, bio this and PubMed that. Um, it started to really get in here. So if you read this, I came up with this. So, multiple cells can perform low-level bioelectrical neural network functions, but a separate management layer would be required to manage that network into useful output. Am I in the ballpark now on this? Yes, you're exactly in the ballpark, and you've nailed the key architecture of these systems. Well, wait a minute. That is a very different answer than what we were just told in that post and what its early answers were. And then it gives me why. And then I said, okay, so I'm guessing that the real advantage of this is the power requirement, and resulting heat generation is high for microchips and low for biological cells performing comparable function. Am I in the ballpark? Yes, you're dead right. So, I mean, we just answered the question. Can you take and in a biological medium, put a series of synthesized human neurons, link them electronically, use way less power to execute them, and way less heat generated as a result of that than you would if you were doing that by silicon switches, but you have to put the exact layer that you do with the chip itself and all the functioning layers to be able to make it function and then produce an output. And the answer is yes, you do. So, what's the benefit? Lower power um, and lower heat generation by a factor of somewhere between 3 to 6. It wasn't really clear, 3 to 5, I think. Now, um, that is a very different answer than what we got at the beginning and what that thing was. The problem for people like us is this is why you have to push on the answer because the answer is given early on, even though it said it was real and so forth. I would just tell you this is what you're seeing Elon Musk do today in Neuralink, Deirdre.
Right.
He's actually taking, but instead of synthesized human neurons, he's actually connecting those electronically and firing them with, computer chips to have them function again, even though in some ways they've been cut off or redirected. That's what Neuralink is doing with not only nerve cells but also brain cells. Now, there are all kinds of other environmental problems with that, mobility issues and environmental issues, but he's doing that today. So is the science working? Yeah, it's working. All this is just saying is, oh, by the way, if you wanted to take and create synthesized neurons and put them in a biological environment, you could actually do the same thing. And there's a benefit to it. Heat, power. Okay, got it. But I can't then talk about the dystopian, harvesting human brains to go create massive data, operations.
Right. The reason this example interests me so much, Tom, is that it shows how you really have to dig down, that you have to remember what is happening when the research is done, when Grok is doing the research here, that Grok is going to all of these sources, it's synthesizing the answers, but this is what I'll call raw academic research. It doesn't bring a sensibility about how the science works or about what's happening or what's real or how to interpret some of the information here. This is what the humans bring to such answers like this. It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of understanding what's in the answer you get, which is why it's always very interesting to check the thoughts column so you can see what the agents are doing, where they're going, what the sources are coming from, and so forth. So you get a sense of the validity of the information and, for people in business, the applicability of the information to your business. There aren't many businesses, frankly, that are going to be using this sort of information. So how do you interpret it? and what do you get out of it? It really gets down to what you and I have said multiple times in each of these videos. You need to understand what you're doing with these models. They can be tremendously powerful, tremendously useful, but you have to exercise every bit of what you as a human bring to the interaction, to the partnership, to get what is useful out of the work with the models.
So I would just say the reason why it's interesting to think about this are are perhaps these two questions here. What am I missing? And then how do motivations align? So let me leave you with this. Um, Cortical Labs is funded by In-Q-Tel, which is the investment arm of the CIA. It just makes me wonder how the motivations are aligned with the CIA and this company called, what's it called? Cortical
Critical
Labs.
lab.
Cortical
Mhm.
Labs. That's the interesting question here. And also, as we said, just as a point, don't let the models convince you of something just because they're making a compelling argument. It's just like a human being. You don't accept a human being walking into you with a very confident um, answer. You just
Mhm.
don't do that. Don't let the models do it. And so that's why you see me treat this no differently than I treat a human being. Because to me, this is just like a really smart person that's done a lot of work and done a lot of job here to get you an answer. And they come in and they give you the answer. I would tell you, if a human being walked in with that, you would have the kind of reaction that Deirdre and I have because we have trained ourselves to function these ways. But this is the other reason why I recommend don't don't get caught up in assuming they're experts. Treat them like just like you would a very smart, capable, but somewhat naive compared to you um, human being. Now, this is an area, Deirdre, that if this had happened to your relatives, right, it
Yeah.
wouldn't have gotten past the first few sentences, nor my sister, by the way. She happens to be expert in this field, and her whole family is. But
But
there
that
are people
that's
like us that are not necessarily, although it just logically made no sense.
and that's why it's always very interesting to look at the sources that are used. Because remember when we were looking at the sources, you kept saying, that's a lab, that's a lab, that's a lab. What are the motivations of those labs there? They want to get resources, as Cortical Lab did. They want to get resources, i.e., funding, to continue their research. So, of course, they're going to talk about the science and its potential in a way that does that. They're not fabricating, they're not probably talking beyond the truth and so forth, but you have to understand what the report means and then what it means for your own project. Are your motivations aligned with the lab's motivations in terms of this research? And then what am I missing? What's this research for? How can I interpret it? What else do I need to know to understand the underlying biology here? So you just keep asking yourself, what am I missing? And that's how you can make better use of the information that these models bring to you.
Deirdre, it's always a pleasure.
Tom, always a pleasure. So long for now.